Right now, as you sit here watching this, your heart is beating around 100,000 times today. 100,000 times. And here's what nobody has ever told you. Each of those beats, every single one, is being shaped by something you have almost total control over. 90%. That is the number I want you to hold on to. 90% of your risk of a sudden devastating heart attack comes from 9 specific factors, 9 things you can actually change. Let that sink in. Not your genetics, not bad luck, not the age on your driver's license. 9 factors, 9 modifiable, controllable factors. A landmark study proved this. The largest cardiovascular investigation ever conducted on real human beings. 29,000 people, 52 countries, every major ethnic group, every region of the world. They followed these people, collected their data, and asked one precise question: what actually causes heart attacks? The findings should have changed medicine permanently. They didn't. And here is the part that should make you angry, not at your doctor, but at the system that gave your doctor exactly 7 minutes to explain it to you. 7 minutes per appointment. That is the average. 7 minutes to review your medications, check your blood pressure, renew your prescriptions, address any new symptoms, answer your questions, and somehow walk you through the most important cardiovascular research of the last 20 years. It does not happen. It cannot happen. Not in 7 minutes. So most people walk out of those appointments knowing what to take, but not why their arteries are in danger, not what is actually happening inside their chest, not what specific number tells the real story of their heart attack risk. That ends today. I am going to walk you through all 9 factors, starting with number 9 and counting down to number 1. And I want to warn you about number 1 right now. I am going to warn you because you need to carry this thought through the entire video. Number 1 is not what you expect. It is not the risk factor your doctor routinely checks. It is the factor that accounted for nearly half of all heart attack risk in the 29,000 person study. Half. And most people over 60 have never had the specific measurement tested. Stay with me until the end, because that information alone may be the most important thing you will hear this year. But first, tell me something. How old are you right now? Drop your age in the comments. I genuinely want to know who is watching this. Now, let me tell you why I am making this video. And it is personal. My name is Dr. Kent. I have spent over 2 decades in cardiovascular medicine. And I will be straight with you about what pushed me to sit down and record this. It was not one patient. It was a pattern. Over and over, I see people come through with preventable heart events, not slightly preventable, almost entirely preventable. People who were told their labs were fine. People who did everything the system asked of them, took their medications, showed up for checkups, and still had a heart attack that should never have happened because nobody connected the dots for them. Nobody had time. I am going to be that time today. Now. Before I tell you who I want you to think about as I walk you through this list, I need to tell you something important. Everything I share today is based on published research and clinical observation. It is not a replacement for your personal medical care. Always bring what you learn here to your doctor. A good doctor will welcome that conversation. Let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret is 71 years old, retired school teacher, 4 grandchildren who call her every Sunday. She is the kind of woman who shows up on time, takes notes, and does exactly what she is told. She had been doing exactly what she was told for years. Medications as prescribed, her sensible diet, morning walks with her dog. And when she came to see me 3 years ago, she looked fine on paper. But Margaret had something working against her that none of her previous doctors had ever explained, because none of them had time. I am going to weave her story through this entire video because her situation connects to almost every single factor on this list. And her transformation, what happened when someone finally sat down and explained the full picture, is exactly what I want for you. Let us begin the countdown. Factor number 9, alcohol. Now, I need to handle this one carefully because the story on alcohol has changed significantly, and most people are still operating on the old version. For decades, the medical community talked about moderate drinking as potentially protective for the heart. A glass of red wine. The French paradox. You have heard it. Your doctor may have mentioned it. Here is the honest update. A 2018 analysis in The Lancet, one of the most comprehensive ever conducted, looked at the full health picture, not just heart disease. All outcomes combined: cancer, liver disease, cognitive decline, cardiovascular events. The conclusion was uncomfortable for a lot of people to hear. When you account for all health outcomes, there is no truly safe level of alcohol consumption. The apparent cardiovascular benefit in older studies was built on flawed comparisons. Many of the non-drinkers in those data sets were former heavy drinkers who had stopped due to illness. That made abstainers look sicker than they were. When you correct for that, the protective benefit disappears. Now, I am not here to tell you never to have a glass of wine at your granddaughter's wedding. That is not the spirit of this. What I am saying is this: if you have been drinking regularly because you believed it was protecting your heart, you have been given incomplete information. That belief was based on compromised data, and the system never updated you. Here is what I need to be crystal clear about for those of you on medications. If you are taking warfarin or any anticoagulant, even moderate alcohol can affect your INR levels in unpredictable ways. If you are on statins, alcohol can worsen the muscle-related side effects that some people experience. If you are on certain blood pressure medications, alcohol interacts with how those medications are metabolized. Before changing your alcohol habits in either direction, talk to your doctor, but know that the old "one glass a day is good for your heart" message is no longer supported by the full evidence. But here is what I want you to notice. Alcohol is factor number 9, one of 9. 8 more factors to go, and what is coming up next? Hits much closer to home for almost everyone watching. Factor number 8, physical inactivity. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You have heard this before. Move more. Stay with me, because what the research actually shows about the mechanism and about how little movement is actually enough will change how you think about this completely. Here is the picture I want you to hold. Think of your blood vessels as garden hoses that have been left in the sun for 20 years. Old rubber, stiff. They have lost the elasticity they were designed to have. Blood has to push harder to get through. Now, physical movement, even gentle movement, is like squeezing those hoses gently and regularly. It keeps the walls responsive. It sends signals to the inner lining of your vessels, a single layer of cells called the endothelium, to stay active, to produce a compound called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the signal that tells your blood vessels to stay flexible, to stay open, to resist the early stages of plaque formation. Without regular movement, that signal goes quiet. The endothelium becomes less responsive, and a quiet endothelium is the beginning of an artery that is slowly losing the battle. Here is the number that surprises almost everyone I share it with. 10 minutes of walking after each meal has been shown in multiple controlled studies to reduce post-meal blood sugar spikes by up to 22%. Not after an hour of exercise, after 10 minutes. After the meal you just ate, 22% from 10 minutes. And for every additional 30 minutes of moderate activity per week, your cardiovascular risk continues to drop in a measurable, documented way. Now, I need to be specific about who should exercise carefully. If you have been diagnosed with congestive heart failure, even gentle exercise programs require medical supervision. Increasing fluid demand on a failing heart without guidance can be dangerous. Talk to your doctor before starting. For most people over 60 without severe cardiac restrictions, walking is medicine, the most underused, most accessible, most cost-free medicine available. But before I get to factor 7, I want to come back to Margaret. When I reviewed Margaret's history in detail, something jumped out at me immediately. She had been having what she described as episodes, moments of unusual fatigue after climbing her stairs, a heaviness in her chest that she had been dismissing as anxiety. She mentioned these symptoms to her previous doctor, twice, both times, given the 7-minute window. It was attributed to age, to stress, to being 71. I am not criticizing her previous doctor. I am criticizing a system that gives 7 minutes to evaluate someone describing exertional chest heaviness at 71 years old. I ordered a full panel, and when the results came back, I understood exactly what had been building. I am going to tell you specifically what I found when I get to factor number 1, but I need you to understand factors 7 through 2 first, because what Margaret had connected to almost every item on this list. It was not one problem, it was a pattern. And the pattern had been invisible in 7-minute windows for 3 years. Factor number 7, low fruit and vegetable consumption. Now, before I explain the science behind this one, I want to give you something to hold on to. Here is what most doctors do not have time to explain in a 7-minute visit. The reason vegetables protect your heart goes far deeper than fiber and vitamins. What I'm about to describe will make every food decision feel like it has a mechanism behind it. A reason, not just a rule. Think of the inner lining of your arteries again, that non-stick coating, the endothelium. When that lining is healthy, blood cells flow past without sticking. Clots do not form easily. Vessels stay flexible and responsive. That lining depends on a constant supply of compounds called antioxidants to protect it from damage. Your body produces some, but a significant portion needs to come from food, specifically from plant foods. Polyphenols in berries, nitrates in leafy greens that your body converts to nitric oxide, flavonoids in citrus fruits, lycopene in tomatoes. These are not buzzwords. They are the molecules that directly support the lining of your blood vessels. When that lining is starved of these compounds, oxidative stress builds. Inflammation sets in. The non-stick surface begins to roughen. Things begin to stick. That roughening is the beginning of atherosclerosis, the beginning of plaque, the beginning of the path toward a blocked artery. A 2022 review in the European Heart Journal analyzed data from over 800,000 individuals. People who ate the most fruits and vegetables had a 31% lower risk of cardiovascular disease. 31%, not from a medication, from food, now. If you are on warfarin, I need to say this clearly. Leafy greens like kale, spinach, and collards are high in vitamin K. They affect how warfarin works. Do not suddenly change the amount of these vegetables you eat without telling your doctor. Consistency is the word your pharmacist would use. Consistency, not elimination. For most people, the goal is simple. 2 additional servings of vegetables or fruit per day, not a dramatic overhaul. 2 servings every day, berries, leafy greens, beets, citrus. These are not expensive. They are not complicated. They are being left off millions of plates because nobody connected the mechanism to the meal. Now I want to transition to factor 6, and I need your full attention for this one, because when I tell you what the Interheart study found about this factor, some of you are going to feel uncomfortable. Factor number 6, psychosocial stress and depression. Here is your handrail before the science. I know this one sounds like soft medicine, like wellness advice from a magazine. Stay with me for 60 seconds, because this is not soft. This is documented in the most rigorous cardiovascular study ever conducted. After controlling for every other factor on this list, chronic psychological stress and clinical depression independently increased heart attack risk. Independently. That word is critical. It means even in people with normal blood pressure, in normal cholesterol, no smoking, no diabetes, chronic stress still showed up as a significant measurable cardiovascular risk factor. So why does stress do this? Here is the mechanism. Your body has a stress response system. It is designed for short, intense bursts, a predator, a fall, a crisis that lasts 30 seconds and then resolves. When that system stays activated for weeks, months, years, something goes wrong at a cellular level. Cortisol stays elevated. It is the primary stress hormone. And chronically elevated cortisol does 3 specific things to your cardiovascular system. First, it raises blood pressure, not dramatically in any one moment, but consistently, day after day. Second, it promotes low-grade systemic inflammation. Think of it as a fire smoldering inside your walls. You cannot see it. You cannot feel it directly, but it is weakening the structure from the inside slowly every single day. Third, it accelerates damage to the endothelium, the same lining I have been describing throughout this video. And the connection to depression? Depression activates the same stress pathways. It is not simply a mood problem. It is a physiological state that changes your inflammatory markers, your cortisol patterns, your heart rate variability. In the Interheart data, the increase in heart attack risk from psychosocial stress was comparable in magnitude to the risk from hypertension. Let that sink in. The stress you carry, the grief you have not fully processed, the loneliness that crept in after retirement or after losing a spouse. It shows up in your cardiovascular risk profile as surely as your blood pressure does. Now, I know what you are thinking. My stress is not something I can turn off. You are absolutely right, and I am not going to insult you by suggesting otherwise. What the research shows works is specific. Social connection, not social media, but actual human contact, has direct measurable effects on inflammatory markers. People with strong social ties have lower levels of C-reactive protein, a direct marker of cardiovascular inflammation, purpose, and meaning. People who retire and maintain a strong sense of purpose through volunteering, creative work, grandchildren, community, have measurably different cardiovascular risk profiles than those who do not. Physical activity, which I just described, it is one of the most effective stress system regulators available. And for depression specifically, this is important. Clinical depression is a medical condition. It deserves medical attention. Lifestyle changes help. But if you are experiencing persistent low mood, loss of interest, changes in sleep and energy for more than 2 weeks, please bring this to your doctor, not as an afterthought. As a cardiovascular risk factor you are actively managing. If you are taking antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications, do not make changes without your doctor. Many of these medications interact with cardiovascular medications in ways that need to be monitored. Now, before I continue, if this information is genuinely new to you, if this is the conversation your doctor's appointment never had time for, please hit the like button right now. It costs you nothing. But it tells the algorithm that this information is valuable, and it helps put this in front of someone who needs it just as much as you did at the start of this video. I want to check in on Margaret. When I sat down with her test results and walked through each factor one by one. Factor 6 stopped us completely. Margaret had lost her husband 3 years before she came to see me. She had been managing everything alone since then: the house, the finances, the silence at the dinner table. I thought I was handling it, she told me. Picture her sitting very still in that chair, hands folded in her lap, looking at the test results on the desk between us. I kept myself busy. I thought that was the same as being okay. It is not the same. The inflammatory markers in her blood work had been elevated for at least 2 years. Her previous doctor had noted them. But in 7 minutes, there was no space to connect the dots, to ask what her life actually looked like, to understand that grief unprocessed was sitting in her coronary arteries as surely as any dietary fat. I adjusted her protocol, and then I looked at the piece of her panel that I needed you to understand before I could explain it properly: the lipid results, but not the standard ones. I am almost ready to tell you what I found. 2 more factors first, because they both connected directly to what I was looking at. Factor number 5, abdominal obesity. Now, stop right here, because the most important thing I can tell you about this factor is what it is not about. It is not about your weight. It is not about the number on your scale. It is not about your BMI. The Interheart study specifically measured something different: waist to hip ratio, because it is not how much you weigh that drives cardiovascular risk. It is where you store fat. Here is why this distinction matters so much. Visceral fat, the fat stored around your internal organs, is not passive tissue. It is not insulation sitting there doing nothing. It is metabolically active. It functions almost like a separate organ, and it is a malfunctioning one. Visceral fat produces a continuous stream of inflammatory signals. It disrupts the way your body processes cholesterol. It promotes a state that researchers call prothrombotic, meaning your blood is being pushed toward clotting more easily than it should. Here is the picture I want you to hold. Imagine a factory inside your abdomen that is producing low-grade inflammatory chemicals around the clock. every day, without stopping, feeding those signals directly into the blood supply surrounding your heart. That is visceral fat, not padding, a source. You can have a completely normal BMI. You can look slim by the standards most people use and still have dangerous levels of visceral fat stored around your organs. I see this regularly in practice. The measurement that matters is your waist circumference. For women over 60, a waist above 35 inches is a meaningful risk signal. For men over 60, above 40 inches. Even more informative is your waist to hip ratio. Measure your waist at the narrowest point. Measure your hips at the widest point. Divide waist by hips. For men, above 0.9 is elevated risk. For women, above 0.85. This measurement tells you more about your cardiovascular risk than your bathroom scale does. And you can do it at home with a $10 tape measure. Here is the good news, and I genuinely mean this as good news. Visceral fat is highly responsive to lifestyle change, more responsive than subcutaneous fat, the fat you can pinch under your skin. Visceral fat moves when you move. It responds to reduced refined carbohydrates. It responds to the walking protocol I described earlier, often faster than the scale reflects. Your waist to hip ratio may start improving within 4 to 6 weeks of consistent change, even if your total weight does not shift dramatically. Now, factor number 4, and I need to give you a moment before I explain this one. Here is something I want you to really hear. Diabetes and heart disease are not two separate problems that happen to coexist. They are the same problem, upstream and downstream. Understanding the mechanism takes about 90 seconds. And once you understand it, you will never look at a food label the same way again. Factor number 4, diabetes and chronic blood sugar dysregulation. Here is your handrail before the science. What I am about to describe is not complicated, but it connects food to your arteries in a direct mechanical way that most people have never been shown. Once you see it, it cannot be unseen. When blood glucose stays elevated, even mildly elevated in what doctors call the pre-diabetic range, something specific happens to the endothelium. Remember that nonstick coating, the single layer of cells lining your blood vessels? Persistently elevated blood sugar damages that lining directly. Think of it as pouring a mildly corrosive liquid through your arteries repeatedly. Not enough to cause obvious pain, not enough to trigger a crisis in any single day. But every day, for months, for years, the coating gets damaged, it becomes rough, inflamed, and rough, inflamed surfaces trap the exact particles that form plaques. This is the direct, mechanical, completely documented chain between blood sugar and heart attack. It is not theoretical, it is anatomy. Think of it this way. Your blood vessels are meant to carry a smooth, regulated flow of fuel to your organs. Chronic blood sugar elevation is like turning that smooth flow into a high-pressure blast, over and over and over. The walls were not designed for that. They show the damage over time. Here is the part that disturbs me most about this factor. Type 2 diabetes in the early stages is almost completely silent. Pre-diabetes, which affects an enormous number of people over 60, is completely silent. People walk around for years with blood sugar causing daily microscopic damage to their coronary arteries. They feel fine. Their basic blood work looks acceptable, and nobody connects the dots. My own brother-in-law is a builder. He is physically active from early morning to early evening every day. He is not overweight. You would look at him and think he is the picture of metabolic health. He was diagnosed with pre-diabetes last year. This is not a laziness problem. This is not a willpower problem. This is a food environment problem. The ultra-processed foods that are everywhere, designed to be consumed quickly in large quantities to maximize palatability, cause blood sugar responses that whole foods never would. Here is your specific action for factor 4. At your next blood test, ask for your HbA1c. Write those letters down right now. HbA1c. This is the measurement of your average blood sugar over the past 3 months. It is far more informative than a single fasting glucose reading. Normal, below 5.7%. Prediabetes, 5.7 to 6.4%. Diabetes, 6.5% or above. If you are already on metformin or insulin, this is critical. When you significantly increase fiber and vegetables and reduce refined carbohydrates, your blood sugar often drops more than expected, which is a good thing. But if you are on insulin specifically, monitor your levels carefully during dietary changes. Doses that were calibrated to your previous diet may need adjustment. Your doctor needs to know you are making changes. Now, I need to come back to Margaret because this is where her story got difficult. Margaret's HbA1c was 6.1, pre-diabetic range. Her fasting blood sugar had been creeping upward for 2 years. It was documented in her old lab results. Nobody had flagged it as requiring active intervention. When I showed her the pattern in her own previous tests, she was quiet for a long moment. "I eat sensibly," she said finally. And she did. She ate what she had been taught was sensible 20 years ago. Low fat, reasonable portions, no obvious sugar. But the low fat products she chose, many of them replaced fat with added sugar to maintain palatability. The fresh orange juice she drank every morning because she believed in her bones that it was protecting her heart caused a blood sugar spike every single day for a decade. Picture her face in that moment. Not anger, confusion, really. The particular confusion of someone who did everything right and learned they were given the wrong map. "Why did nobody tell me this?" she asked. 7 minutes. That is why. I started her on a protocol, and the first 2 weeks were genuinely hard. She messaged me on day 8. "I miss my juice, and I feel tired. Is this supposed to happen?" I'm going to tell you exactly what happened next, but first, factor number 3, because this one touches more people over 60 than almost any other item on this list. Factor number 3, high blood pressure, hypertension. Here is what I need you to understand about why this particular factor sits in the top 3. Not because it is the most dramatic, but because it is the most invisible. Unless your blood pressure is so elevated that it causes headaches or visual changes, you feel nothing, absolutely nothing. Normal, fine. Meanwhile, your heart is working against a pressure load it was never designed to sustain. Every single beat. Here is the picture I want in your mind. Your blood vessels should be like flexible rubber tubing. They should expand slightly with each heartbeat and relax between beats. That flex is health. Chronic hypertension slowly converts those flexible rubber tubes into something more like rigid ceramic. They lose that expand and relax capacity. Blood has to push harder to get through. The heart works harder to push it. The vessel walls thicken and stiffen to withstand the pressure. And the smaller vessels, the ones supplying your kidneys, your brain, the back of your eyes, are under a constant low-level assault that compounds every single day. Your heart is a muscle, and like any muscle forced to work harder than it was designed to work. For years, it enlarges, stiffens, and eventually begins to fail. The numbers, and I am going to be specific because specific matters here. For most adults over 60, the target is below 130/80. Some guidelines for older adults allow slightly higher. Your specific target needs to come from your doctor based on your full medical picture. Here is the protocol I give every patient, not vague, specific. Check your blood pressure at home. Same time every morning, between 7 and 9 a.m. Sit in a chair quietly for 5 full minutes first, not 3 minutes. 5. Feet flat on the floor. No talking. Then take 3 readings with a 30-second gap between each. Record the average of the 3. Do this every day for 2 weeks. Bring that log to your doctor. A reliable blood pressure monitor costs between $20 and $30 at any pharmacy or online retailer. That is one of the highest value medical investments available to you at any price. Red flags that require calling your doctor or seeking immediate care. Any reading above 180/120. Any sudden severe headache with elevated readings. Any vision changes alongside elevated pressure. These are emergencies, not watch and wait. Now, the lifestyle interventions for hypertension. And I want to say this clearly. These are interventions with clinical trial data, not supplements with soft evidence. Clinical trials, the DASH eating pattern, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, has been shown in rigorous controlled trials to lower systolic blood pressure by 8 to 14 millimeters of mercury. That is in the range of a medication. From food, reducing sodium below 1,500 milligrams per day for people over 60, significant impact. Increasing potassium through food, bananas, sweet potatoes, avocado, leafy greens, directly counteracts the blood vessel effects of sodium. Reducing alcohol, which I covered earlier. Regular physical movement, which I covered earlier. Now, here is what I need to say clearly about medications and hypertension. If your doctor has prescribed blood pressure medication, do not stop it, do not reduce it, do not take it every other day because your home readings looked good. Uncontrolled hypertension has severe and immediate risks. Lifestyle changes work alongside medication, not instead. And one specific drug interaction warning. If you are on ACE inhibitors or potassium-sparing diuretics, do not add potassium supplements without telling your doctor. These medications can already raise your potassium to dangerous levels. Too much potassium can cause serious heart rhythm problems. Get potassium from food, not supplements, while on these medications. Factor number 2, smoking. I am going to keep this section short, not because it is unimportant, because the evidence is overwhelming and the message is clear. Current smokers in the InterHeart study had nearly 3 times the heart attack risk of non-smokers. 3 times. Here is the mechanism in one sentence. Every cigarette causes direct, immediate damage to the endothelium, that lining I have described throughout this entire video. Every single cigarette. Active damage, not gradual accumulation over years. Active. Right now, every time. And here is the extraordinary piece of this factor. Your body begins to heal the moment you stop. Within 24 hours of quitting, blood pressure and heart rate start to normalize. Within 1 year of quitting, your risk of coronary heart disease drops by approximately half. Within 15 years, your risk approaches that of someone who never smoked. Your body wants to repair this. It will repair this if you give it the chance. If you currently smoke and you want to stop, I am asking you to make this a genuine medical priority. Speak to your doctor about cessation medications. Varenicline has the strongest evidence. Nicotine replacement therapy is effective. These are clinically validated tools that dramatically improve quit success rates compared to willpower alone. You do not have to white knuckle through this. And if you are someone who quit smoking years or decades ago, take a moment. That decision was one of the most important things you ever did for your cardiovascular system. Now, almost there. I told you at the very start of this video that factor number 1 was going to surprise you. I told you most doctors do not check the specific measurement that captures it. I told you it accounted for nearly half of all heart attack risk in the study. I was not exaggerating any of that. Here it is. Factor number 1, abnormal lipids, and specifically not total cholesterol, not standard LDL, but the ratio of something called ApoB to ApoA1. Stay with me for 90 seconds, because this is going to completely reframe how you understand cholesterol. Think of your bloodstream as a highway. All day long, particles travel along this highway. They carry fats and cholesterol to cells that need them. Some of these particles are large, fluffy, and buoyant. They travel the highway without causing problems. They are even part of the system that removes cholesterol from arterial walls and carries it back to the liver for processing. These are the particles associated with something called ApoA1. Other particles are small, dense, and aggressive. These are the ones that burrow into the walls of your arteries. Once inside, they trigger an immune response. Inflammation begins. The arterial wall thickens around them. A plaque forms. These are the particles associated with ApoB. Now, when your doctor measures standard LDL cholesterol, they are essentially measuring the volume of cholesterol being carried, not the number of dangerous particles, not the specific type causing damage. ApoB directly measures the number of dangerous, artery-penetrating particles, and the InterHeart study found this was the single largest risk factor of all 9. This ratio, dangerous particles to protective particles, explained more heart attack risk than any other single factor across all 29,000 people, across 52 countries, every ethnic group, nearly half, of all heart attack risk from this one measurement, and most routine blood panels do not include it. You have to ask for it by name: ApoB, ApoB, and ApoA1. ApoA1. Write those down right now. These are the two measurements I want you to bring to your next appointment. Some healthcare systems include them automatically. Many do not. You may need to specifically request them. Some people need to access a private lab. It is worth it, because this single piece of information tells you more about your actual arterial risk than the standard cholesterol panel you have been receiving for decades. Now, what moves ApoB in the right direction? The interventions that work best are, perhaps unsurprisingly, the same ones I have been building toward throughout this entire video. Reducing refined carbohydrates and added sugar is one of the most effective interventions for improving lipid particle quality, not just quantity, quality. Regular physical activity directly improves the ApoB to ApoA1 ratio over time. Specific foods with strong clinical evidence: oily fish like salmon, mackerel, and sardines at least twice per week. Walnuts. A large Spanish trial following over 7,000 people found that adding walnuts to a Mediterranean diet significantly reduced cardiovascular events. Olive oil. Oats, specifically for their beta-glucan fiber content, which directly reduces LDL particle numbers. And for many people, statins. I want to be direct and honest here. Statins are highly effective medications for reducing ApoB. They are among the most studied drugs in cardiovascular medicine. If your doctor has recommended one and you have concerns about side effects, please have that full conversation. Do not silently stop taking it. Muscle pain and fatigue are real documented side effects that affect some people, and there are multiple statin options, different doses, and alternative medications available. The answer to a statin side effect is a conversation with your doctor, not stopping alone. If you have been told your cholesterol is borderline or slightly elevated, ask specifically for your ApoB to be measured. That borderline LDL number tells you far less than the particle count does. Now, Margaret. When I looked at Margaret's ApoB result, it was elevated, meaningfully elevated, in the presence of what appeared to be an acceptable standard LDL on her old panels. Her previous doctors had seen a borderline cholesterol number, and in 7 minutes, there was no space to dig deeper, to order the particle count, to ask the more precise question. I sat with her for a full hour. I walked through every factor with her one by one. The alcohol she occasionally relied on to manage the quiet of an empty house, the physical activity that had dropped off after her husband died, the inflammation from 3 years of unprocessed grief, the pre-diabetic blood sugar from years of believing orange juice was medicine, the elevated waist-to-hip ratio that her scale had never revealed, the blood pressure that had been creeping upward, the ApoB that had been building unchecked. Every single factor in one person. And here is what I want you to understand. Margaret was not unlucky. Margaret was not careless. Margaret was doing exactly what the system had told her to do, with the 7 minutes of information the system had given her. She just never got the full picture until she did. Here is your action protocol. Specific steps, starting this week. Step 1, blood work. At your next appointment or at a private lab, request the following: HbA1c, ApoB, ApoA1, standard lipid panel, fasting glucose. These 4 measurements together give you a genuine picture of your cardiovascular risk. Write these words down: HbA1c, ApoB, ApoA1. Step 2, home blood pressure monitoring. Purchase a monitor, $20 to $30 at any pharmacy. Check every morning for 2 weeks. Log every reading. Same time, same arm, 5 minutes of sitting quietly first. Bring that log to your next appointment. Step 3, walking after meals. Not a gym, not a jogging schedule. 10 minutes after dinner, every day for 4 weeks. Then evaluate. Step 4, 1 food swap per day. Not a complete diet overhaul. 1 swap. The orange juice becomes a whole orange. The white bread becomes something with actual fiber. The packaged afternoon snack becomes a handful of walnuts. 1 swap every day for 4 weeks. Step 5, One honest stress conversation with your doctor, a family member, a counselor, or a trusted friend. Not, I am fine. An actual inventory of what you are carrying, because factor 6 showed up in 29,000 people's heart attack data. It will show up in yours if you leave it unaddressed. Now, I need to be completely honest with you about what to expect from these changes. Week 1, you are going to feel the friction. The walks will feel like an obligation. The food swaps will feel inconvenient. If you are reducing refined sugar and processed carbohydrates, your energy may dip as your blood sugar stops its daily spikes and crashes. You might feel slightly worse before you feel better. I am not going to lie to you about this. It is annoying, and it is temporary. Week 2, the numbers begin to shift. Morning blood pressure typically shows the first movement. For most people I work with, within 10 to 14 days of consistent daily walking and modest sodium reduction, systolic blood pressure drops by 4 to 8 points on average. That is not dramatic, but it is real, and it is directional. You are watching your biology respond. Week 3. This is the breakthrough week. Almost universally, the mid-afternoon energy slump that most people over 60 accept as normal begins to soften. The reason is blood sugar stabilization. When you stop the daily spike and crash cycle, your energy becomes more even across the day. Most people I work with call me somewhere around week 3, not week 4, week 3, week 4, and beyond. The numbers that matter start moving in ways that are visible in a lab. HbA1c responds slowly. It reflects 3 months of history, but the trajectory becomes clear. ApoB often begins responding to dietary changes within 6 to 8 weeks. Blood pressure may have already reached a new stable lower range. Here is the thing about most people. Most people quit after 3 days. They feel the friction of week 1 and interpret it as evidence that it is not working, or they feel it is too complicated, or life gets busy, and the heart attack that was preventable happens at 68, or 71, or 73. Here is what I want you to carry forward from today. The discomfort of week 1 is not evidence that it is not working. It is evidence that something is changing. Your body is recalibrating. That friction is not a reason to stop. It is confirmation that you started. Is 4 weeks of inconvenience worth reducing your risk of the disease that kills more people than anything else on earth? Only you can answer that. But now you have the information to make a real choice. Let me finish Margaret's story. 6 weeks after she began the protocol, she sent me her numbers. Morning blood pressure, down from 148 over 92 to 131 over 83. Fasting glucose, down from 109 to 94, out of pre-diabetic range. And then she called me rather than just messaging, because she wanted to say something out loud. I forgot what it felt like to not be tired, she said. Picture her voice in that call, lighter than it had been in years, genuinely lighter. I thought that was just what 71 felt like. I thought tired was my new normal. It was not her new normal. It was her body running on incomplete information for 3 years. At her 6-month follow-up, her ApoB had dropped to within target range for the first time in years. And she told me something I think about often. I spent 3 years managing my grief, she said. I never once thought it was also managing my heart. Nobody connected those two things for me. Now they are connected for you. Today you have taken an important journey. You now understand something that most people walking around right now do not understand. Not because they are less intelligent, but because the system that was supposed to tell them ran out of time. You now know about all 9 factors, their mechanisms, what each one is actually doing inside your blood vessels, the specific measurements to request, the protocol to begin this week. You now know the single most important thing most people have never had checked. ApoB, the particle that accounts for nearly half of all heart attack risk. The test your doctor may never have ordered because nobody asked. And you understand the 90% of first heart attack risk, sitting within the reach of what you do next. That is not a small thing. That is the full picture. If you made it to the end of this video, type "I finished" in the comments right now. And then I want you to think of one specific person, a parent, a spouse, a sibling, a close friend, someone who is being managed in 7-minute appointments and has never had this conversation. Send them this video. Today, not tomorrow. The 7-minute appointment will not tell them. You can, and save this video. The protocol section in the second half is worth coming back to when you have your lab results in front of you. Now, before I finish, I need to plant a seed for next week because there is something I did not fully address today, and it is going to change something you have probably believed your entire life. You now know that abnormal lipids are factor number 1. You now know that ApoB is the measurement that matters. But here is the question nobody is asking. There are people who do everything right. Mediterranean diet, regular exercise, no smoking, healthy waist-to-hip ratio, no diabetes, and their ApoB is still dangerously elevated, and there is a specific reason for that, a reason that has nothing to do with what they eat, a reason that your standard lipid panel cannot see. Next week, I am going to show you what drives abnormal lipid particles in people who should be fine. And the answer is going to require you to throw out something you have probably believed about cholesterol for decades. That is next week. Everything I shared today is based on published research and clinical experience. It is educational information, not a replacement for your personal medical care. The case study presented represents a pattern I have seen repeatedly, a composite of common clinical experiences rather than a single individual. Your situation is unique. Always bring what you learn here to your doctor before making changes to your medications, diet, or supplement routine. References are listed in the description below.